even despite the pandemic, we're looking at extremely strong growth in 2021. I mean, effectively, demand rebounding to the point in all major consuming regions back to its 2019 levels.
Hello and welcome to the Assay. Today we have Angela Durrant, Senior Research Manager at Wood Mackenzie, here to talk to us about the outlook for the nickel market. So Angela, thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
And so I suppose to kick things off, it would be really great to talk about kind of where you see supply, demand, and pricing happening. What's the current environment and what's the near-term outlook that you are predicting?
Absolutely, no, with pleasure. Well, we've had such an interesting run in the nickel market, especially over the last year. We have seen prices really catapult probably since about March 2020. And this has really just been supported by, very strong fundamentals. So even despite the pandemic, we're looking at extremely strong growth in 2021. I mean, effectively, demand rebounding to the point in all major consuming regions back to its 2019 levels. In terms of supply, we are very restricted. The market is particularly tight at the moment, and this is also supporting prices, and stock levels have continued to come down as well. So the support for these things have naturally been from the traditional consumers, i.e. the stainless market, which still accounts for 60 to 70% of demand for nickel. However, the battery and EV thematic is becoming more and more exciting and gathering place around the globe. While we see that there is probably enough supply at the moment to feed the chain of batteries and EV materials, it will fall into a shortage probably by around 2022 through to 2025. So investment in that sector is really required in the near term. It needs to really start now, so that those units can actually be shored up. But over the, in the years out to 2030, we are looking at 6 years of consecutive deficits. So price strength, we expect will continue for some time. Some softening off, say, in 2023 and 2024, but from then until 2030, we are looking at a tight market with a great deal of price strength.
And is it really the EV and battery market that is influencing this kind of supply deficit that we're seeing? I mean, you're kind of seeing it across all of the battery metals. Is it really going to be as intense as analysts have predicted?
Yes, I think there is a great deal of intensity around it, and I think there is quite a scramble to secure those nickel units for the battery market. It needs to come from a number of different sources. And so you see large companies such as China's Tsingshan announcing in March earlier this year regarding a conversion of nickel pig iron lines, which generally feed the stainless steel market, over to matte, which is a more refined product that will feed the battery sector.
So apart from Tsingshan, where do you see most of the supply starting to come from?
Well, Indonesia will certainly continue to be a large supply provider, but I think we can see, say, in markets in Australia, also in Russia, in Canada, some of the more traditional sectors are certainly investing a lot more in their brownfield research, in their geology research. There's been more, I suppose, exploration than there has been in some times, and you would expect in a period of high prices that this would very much be promoted. So, we are looking at companies the likes of BHP really expanding their resource base in order to secure nickel units, because they have become a fully integrated producer in that they will produce nickel sulfate at their Kwinana refinery, which will be sold internationally they've already actually hooked up with Tesla and various other providers to work directly in that supply chain. So yeah, there are quite exciting times ahead, but the need for nickel, it continues to be there. I think the caveat around it we all have to understand, and I think your viewers will understand from my presentation as well, is that there is possibilities of battery chemistry and manufacturing changing and potentially taking some of the nickel out of batteries. But at the moment, we really don't see that happening in the very short term. We would think that most auto vehicle makers would be looking at a 5-year time horizon at least before they would start to muck around with the chemistries or potentially change and, try and maybe extract higher cost nickel out of batteries. But it's always a threat. Like, it is something that needs to be back of mind, or, a consideration certainly for producers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that really brings me to my next question, which was looking at future battery chemistry. Do you have predictions or any thoughts on kind of where nickel's role is going to potentially evolve?
Well, I think what is actually positive for nickel, I suppose, is that we can see that cobalt was already taken out of batteries. So nickel has sort of replaced cobalt in that regard, because there was a lot of issues around the extraction of cobalt with the DRC, with, various unsavory kind of extraction processes and child labor and various things like that that made, I suppose, the concept difficult to deal with, but also a complete restriction in supply. So nickel has been able to take advantage of that, but which is a really good thing. But it's not to say that solid state batteries, zinc air, there's all kinds of different technologies which may come to the fore. But we really, as I said in your previous question, we really don't see that over the midterm.
And in terms of supply, do you see recycling taking up kind of a growing role in kind of helping with supply to the markets?
Absolutely. Well, as yes, we've tried to highlight, we see that recycling may actually come up to around 20% of the nickel supply by the time we get to 2040. It's just what kind of form it comes in and how quickly people can get around, or companies can actually start to build these recycling centres. But we are seeing increasing evidence of this in Europe and also in the States, and we expect that it will be rolled out around the globe as people take on, or as companies and also countries take on more electric vehicle stock, and you have greater amounts of batteries that eventually will need to be recycled. And so it's just a question of how this recycling is used, like whether it goes into storage for, say, secondary use to power up your home or something like that. You take your electric vehicle battery and then move it to something else, or whether these boxes are disintegrated and we extract all the raw materials from them in order to reuse them again. So there's, it's an exciting time in that there is a lot happening, and we are at Wood Mackenzie certainly trying to understand what the best parts are, the most environmentally friendly parts actually as well around this kind of extraction.
Yeah. And I mean, that the recycling kind of space really brings in that environmental aspect of ESG considerations. I mean, what's the market saying in terms of ESG considerations for kind of production of nickel?
I think, yeah, apologies for interrupting. I think it's getting extremely more front of mind of consumers and producers alike, and certainly of governments. So I think your average consumer who is looking to purchase an electric vehicle is potentially doing that, for the environment. And so the source of nickel, where it's coming from, how it's mined, whether it's being done sustainably, as environmentally friendly as possible, is becoming increasingly important. And consumers will be driving, pardon the pun, driving the market in that regard. And producers will have to pay attention to that, because they will look to other sources, I suppose, if it doesn't happen in a sustainable environmental way.
Absolutely. Great. Well, that's all my questions that I had for you for today. So thank you so much for coming to take part in this Q&A for the Assay.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me once again, Amy.